Progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. As political leaders and ambassadors often propose, the world needs to change. In order to work towards this transition, it is imperative that humans acknowledge the existence of the only legitimate race, the human race. Our tendency to consider certain races inferior severely reduces the chances of ever being able to unite and inhabit this planet as one culture. Does it ever bother you that you live in a country where your skills, intelligence, and talent will be overlooked because of your color? Does it ever bother you that your color, something you don't even have control over, can actually prevent you from gaining a position in society? Malaysia, as we all know, is a progressive nation. It is a land of cultural diversity. In addition to Malays, the nation is inhabited by Chinese and Indian ethnic groups. Political agendas have a severe impact on all minority races, causing extensive animosity between Malays and the minority racial groups. The media, however, chooses to portray an untruthful or false version of the situation, where they completely overlook racial segregation, violence against dark-skinned people, as well as the division of programs and policies that prohibit minority races from attaining positions of political power. For over 5 decades now, minorities have been denied the right to contest for positions of political power. The Constitution prohibits a non-Malay Muslim from contesting an election for political or authoritative power. Because of that, instances of minority neglection have become increasingly common in Malaysia. A Malay-dominant society has a severe impact on the mindsets, perspectives, and the images of all the races. Why is this happening though? Why are minorities being neglected in a multicultural society? We're going to be finding out. The current powers in charge seek to solidify their voter base by providing policies and programs that benefit and strengthen the Malay dominance in the nation. The provision of Malay-exclusive academic scholarships, for example, severely weakened the relationships between Malay Chinese and Malay Indians. As a result, several Indians and Chinese have resorted to voicing their dissatisfaction by conducting rallies against an apparently radical government. Powers in charge have attempted to make amendments by proposing to work towards the betterment of lives for minorities. However, their efforts have been met with immense criticism from the Malays. A massive heatwave of smear campaigns erupted as Najib besieged his parliament to work for the welfare of minority groups in 2013. Racist remarks were hurled at several dark-skinned Malaysians, and violence against the working class became a matter of utmost concern for the government. People were paranoid. There were Malaysians out there who thought that they would be stripped of all their rights and Malay-exclusive policies if the government worked for the welfare of Bangladeshis. Hordes of radical Malays thronged the streets of Kuala Lumpur in blatant protest of Najib's intention to improve life for Bangladeshi migrants. Many people argue that the government didn't really make an effort to do anything after they faced the riot for Malays. They didn't try to convince the Malays that there'd be no harm if they worked for the welfare of minority races. Instead, they altered their strategy and attempted to solidify their voter base by doing more for the Malays. The presence of an ignorant media makes matters even worse for a racially segregated nation. Television commercials that glorify unity in this nation are accused of being funded by the government. Why are they showing this when the nation is clearly segregated? Why want Malaysia when they know that Malaysia is divided into 3 races: Indians, Chinese, and Malay? By conducting a survey, I gathered some crucial information. About 65% of the people who did my survey said that they'd been victims of racism in Malaysia. That is a big number. In addition, about 90% people said that political powers in charge are not doing their best to induce racial harmony in the country. Also, 92% of the people think that academic scholarships should not be Malay exclusive. They should also be given to Indians and Chinese, which is not a surprise, of course. Another piece of data that I gathered was this right here. 75% of the people think that the media is not actually portraying the reality of the situation very well. They're not really depicting what's actually happening in Malaysia. They're being very biased. They're being a little more biased towards the government. They're not really doing a good job at telling people about what's actually going on. The results of the survey tell us a lot about the situation in Malaysia. Very surprisingly, many people were willing to take part in the survey, and when I gave it to them, they willingly shared their opinions with me. I gathered about 56 written responses that mentioned that there is something wrong with the society in Malaysia and there needs to be a reform. And many people actually felt that the minorities are being neglected in this nation. Attributable to the policies of a radical government, racial segregation in schools and colleges in Malaysia has been increasing at an alarming rate. Races tend to avoid each other because of the severe divide these policies have created between them. To avoid violent altercations, these races deliberately avoid each other and tend to socialize within their respective communities only. It could be argued that these are some repercussions of the 1969 riots between Malay and Chinese groups. Mass killings and instances of extensive violence have instilled fear in the minds of people. Political hindrance is another factor that keeps racial unison at bay. Masses often compare the current state of affairs with another adversarial situation that occurred during an oppressive colonial rule. Perhaps these negative opinions that Malaysians have about different races are remnants of the British rule in Malaysia, as divide and conquer tactics were used to avoid Malaysians of all races from uniting and gaining independence. This is what I gathered from a survey that was conducted in November. In order to comply with the trivial norms in the society, people generally refrain from establishing close relationships with others. This was when I decided to dig deeper. Naviin and Azmee volunteered to share their experience of being segregated in Malaysia. In order to find out what fuels the animosity between races in Malaysia, I'm going to be having a discussion with the representatives of a minority race, the Indians. I'm here with Naviin and Azmee, who are going to share their opinions on why racism is a big issue in Malaysia.
I think it's affected to my life, which is like by the time I was studying. So once I finished, I wanted to go take a loan for my higher education, but then the one word they say is like, usually we give our educational loan is only for Malays. They mention like that. So it's like, I feel like even though I'm a Malaysian, so I'm not getting the benefits like what the Malay culture people getting. I mean it's like the way how government helping the Malay people, not for other race like say for Chinese or Indians, or even the PTPTN or anything like the BREAM, like let's say for the BREAM is like, which is like the family which have the salary of less than 3 or 4Ks. Everyone they get like 300 or 600 from the government for helping the family, but then most of the Indians are not getting that. But then as a people we know like in Malaysia the number one race is Malay, and the second will be the Chinese, and the minority is Indian.
Naviin's statement right there says a lot about minority neglection in Malaysia. Vikar World is a famous YouTuber who addresses this issue on many occasions in many of his videos.
If you are born brown, you are always down. Bapa rhyming gila, bapa gempa bro, bapa mak kau hijau. But yeah, in Malaysia you have to be Malay and you have to be Islam in order for you to be a Prime Minister. But for the sake of fun, let's just assume a Chinese guy were to run the country. our country will definitely be financially rich as or let's say if a much.
Of course, we all know that Vikar isn't the only person who feels the same about the situation. The dissatisfaction is being voiced by the majorities as well. I have with me Azri, who strongly believes that the Malays are tarnishing their own reputation by severely marginalizing the minority races. Azri.
I find that our leaders are actually in fact very racist, even though they claim they are not, but actually they are. Their efforts to condone racism is deeply vague, it's heavily biased, and it's just pointless, okay? It doesn't really help. It's only fueling the fires even more. It's creating more hate than ever than previous times. I'm actually sad because that we Malays are always generalized as people who are power hungry, people who think that they are superior to others, and people who just want to discriminate other races other than themselves. So it's kind of bad actually. For me, I represent the two faces of Malays. We tolerate other races. We appreciate diversity. We appreciate multiculturalism. And there are lots of Malays out there that are like this. Trust me. This is the two faces of Malays.
Thank you, Azri. Like Azri just mentioned, not everyone hates. Not every Malay is bad. In fact, there are many people out there who try to promote racial harmony. But that small proportion of people is not enough to convince the others to take a stand against racism as well. Racism has a massive impact on our perspectives and mindsets. If handled well, it can be eradicated from the society. Leaders have to think beyond gathering support and getting votes to attain positions of power. The media has to address issues concerning racism as well. News channels, magazines, and advertisements need to enlighten people about the reality of a grave situation. The situation can easily be prevented from worsening if political leaders and the media take steps that prohibit any race from attaining a dominant position in Malaysia. One Malaysia, the dream lives on.